So thank you for being here. And you know, one of the great things about doing this is I get to spend some time talking to the authors beforehand. And you know, I mentioned the time that I started my last company. I was in the startup world. You were in the startup world. We're both startup people. You stayed in the startup side and never made the leap over to like professional investing like I did. Going over to the dark side is what I used to tell people. Is there a reason why you didn't, and why you stayed sort of true to being the founder sort of all the way through?
Yeah, I guess I was fortunate enough to figure out pretty early not just what I was good at, but what I loved. And I love starting and running companies. And I know that about myself, and I've known it for a long time. And maybe I would have loved being on the dark side, as you put it, but if you have something you love doing, boy, don't, take that as an amazing gift. But the other thing that kind of scared me away from that is that I was scared of the fact that I would have very little influence on the company. In other words, it felt almost too superficial for me. I need to dig in, I need to understand, I need to have influence and be able to move the parts, and that's the fun part. It would drive me crazy to have people come in, meet with them, tell them these great things that I could see so clearly they had to do, and then they go off and do something totally different. That would drive me crazy.
What you just described is actually the perfect sort of encapsulation of the failure mode of entrepreneurs that try to become venture capitalists. Because you're so used to having your hand on the wheel, you can't take your hand off the wheel.
Yeah, the other thing is, I think it was, maybe it was Tim Haley who told me this, and he goes, when I decided, when I became a VC, I thought it'd be great. It would be like a casual kind of wind it down type of job. I could kind of do it part-time. He goes, no, not at all. So that was the other thing that scared me. It was going to be plunging from the frying pan into the fire.
So let's take a step back and talk about sort of your growing up. You grew up on the East Coast in New York. Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or how did you end up becoming an entrepreneur? How did you end up in Silicon Valley? How did you end up,
So the quick answer is I didn't know I wanted to be an entrepreneur because, as you can tell by looking at me, this is a long time ago when I was a young man, and there wasn't this thing called entrepreneurs. I mean, there certainly were entrepreneurs, or people who were starting companies, but no one referred to it that way. No one said, oh, that guy's not, they go, that's the guy who can't keep a regular job. And so I was spared this kind of mythologizing of entrepreneurship, which we see today, where there's movies about it and TV shows and books, and they're held up as these captains of, I never had that. I was drawn to it for what I'd consider pure reasons, which is I was insanely curious about things. I always wanted to see how things worked, and I always would see the world kind of as this imperfect place, and I'd want to fix it. I'd want to go, why is that? Why can't there be this? Why can't there be that? And so I guess that kind of led me down this path. And there was two other factors about it. And one is that my dad, who was a nuclear engineer, he had a patent, and we had it framed in the living room. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And I kind of go, I want to be an inventor. I want to invent something. And then the last piece that really put the pieces together is that my dad, he turned into a finance professional, very risk averse in his own job. And I think I was his chance to do the things that he perhaps dreamed of doing. And so whenever there was a junction that required risk-taking, he'd push me in that direction. So it was never, what are you crazy? It was always, oh, that sounds really interesting. And so I was taking chances from the very beginning. And I think all those things combined, that when I stumbled into this opportunity to really build something and make something, I was hooked. And that was a long time ago, and I've never stopped.
So your first startups, 5 startups or so that you were involved with before Netflix, they all seem to be in very, well, there were some similarities between some of them, but generally they were in very different areas. Was there a through line between them that sort of like, oh, this like naturally went from this to that and the other?
They've all been people facing. They're not technology for technology's sake. The first bunch, two of the startups were magazines, mail order company. The one that was the weirdest one was a technology company, and I was like, what the hell am I doing here? And luckily, we sold that like 6 months in, so I was spared from ending up in that. But that's the through line, is like, I've always had, one of the things that's weird about having successful companies is you go, what is it? Is this entirely luck? And I kind of believe a lot of it's luck. I go, am I special in some way? And you never know whether there's some things you're doing right. But there's a couple things I do know I'm good at. And one of them is, I call it remote empathy, which is most of us can go to someone and go, all right, I got some bad news for you. And you can read it in their face that what you're going to say is going to hurt them. And then when you see them kind of go like this, you go, oh, my heart goes out. I can kind of guess what the reaction people will do without, when that reaction happens out of sight, out of mind. So, and that's a classic thing for direct marketing. It's a classic thing for catalogs and mail order. It's a classic thing for writing emails. It's constructing these things and trying to anticipate what's going to happen. And so part of the through line is all of these things have involved something that's deeply marketing driven, because that's kind of what I have this pretty good ability to do.
Voice of the customer, to be able to intuit what the customer wants.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Integrity QA, though, was a software company. Just how did you end up at like a pure software company?
So I ended up joining a startup, which was a little bit which was a scanner called Visioneer. Made the Paperport brand of sheet-fed scanners, like a roll of tinfoil size thing, and you put a paper in it, sucked it through. Kind of like magic. And I got hired as the VP of marketing there. And it was the most dysfunctional company I've ever seen. I don't know if someone here might have worked there, so I got to be careful. But basically, there was zero effort to put out fires, zero effort to make hard decisions. It was awful. As my wife said, it's the only time in the entire time she's known me where I didn't look forward to getting up and going to work in the morning. And it was so toxic that when I got fired. When I got fired, let's not sugarcoat this. When I got fired, I kind of did an overreaction. And at the time, two good friends of mine from the company was that before that, we're trying to figure out what to do. And they go, we should do this together. And it was a very cerebral, technical product, but I didn't care. I got to do it with two guys that I knew really well, that I respected, and I knew we'd all get along well. And it ended up working out pretty well, too.
And Integrity QA was what ultimately connected you with Reed.
Yeah, because that company was acquired by Pure Atria, which was the company that Reed Hastings had. He founded Pure Software. He was CEO. He's a founder, and they acquired our company. And it was very early. We were probably 6-9 months in. We weren't even in beta yet. And so my job, because I was the marketing side of it, was very cerebral. I was just interviewing and researching and trying to think about things. And then boom, all of a sudden, those guys all get consigned to the basement to be a business unit. And I'm now working for Reed because he goes, we need a VP of global marketing. And it's like boom, and like one day all of a sudden I'm in this company which has offices all over the world and is even geekier than Integrity QA was. So that was quite a shock. But obviously the big plus here was that I was working directly for Reed Hastings. Turns out that Reed and I lived in the same town, and that set up some pretty fortunate events in my life.
So then when you started thinking about, okay, I'm going to leave this pretty soon and I'm going to go start something, you're in the car with Reed every day and you're bouncing ideas and this sort of thing. Did you have, I mean, the internet was it was actually more than starting to happen. The internet was in full swing. E-commerce was starting to happen. So clearly you were through the book, you talk about the types of things you were doing. They were mostly e-commerce things, but e-commerce wasn't what we know today. Did you have a big vision of, I'm going to create the next e-commerce company? And if so, was that because of your Mac Warehouse experience and everything else, the direct marketing experience?
Yes, 100%. And a quick adjustment, like when I decided to start my next company, that's again sugarcoating it.
Right.
So when I was working at Puratria with Reed for again about 6 months, and then lightning struck us again.
So you can't keep a job, is what you're saying?
I fall upstairs.
There you go.
Is what happens here. Yeah. So we got acquired. They go, we already have a senior VP of marketing. And they also already had a CEO, so Reed was also being made redundant, as they euphemistically put it. And that's when I go, okay, I'm going to start. It was like a 6-month period, 2 public companies, Hart-Scott-Rodino, the whole thing. And I go, awesome. I have to come to work for 6 months. I don't have anything to do. I'm starting a company. And Reed didn't want to start a company. He was going to go back to school. He's going to get a higher grade education, use that to inform his philanthropy. He wants to keep a hand in. So we go, okay, we'll do something. He'll be the angel investor. I'll start and run it. We need an idea. And you're correct, because the first half of my career was direct marketing. I was doing magazines, which is very circulation driven. I was doing catalogs, mail order. So I was a direct marketing dork. And so when I saw the internet happening, and I remember someone came in to the office at the company I was working at and goes, I got to show you this, and installed the browser from Champaign-Urbana, the original one. And he goes, and here's a list of all the websites in the world. And it's like 6 stapled pages. Anyway, but I'm looking at this and I was going, oh, what I saw was this is direct marketing on steroids. This is the most unbelievably powerful personalization technology, direct response. This is incredible. So then I knew when all of a sudden I was being ejected from Puratria and I had a backer and I could start a company, I knew it was going to be an e-commerce company. I go, that is what the reflection of direct marketing on the web is e-commerce. And you're right, there was some initial traction. There was a little company called Amazon. And all it sold at that time was books.
And when you say little company, truly, it was a little company.
Yeah, it was a very little company.
Yeah.
And it's a different story.
Yeah.
We visited that and saw how little this company was. But it was evidence that you could sell stuff and appear to do it okay. So I go, okay, this company, one of my criteria was it's going to be an e-commerce company. That was number one. Second criteria was it's got to involve some level of personalization. I mean, this is the whole direct response thing. We have to do something personal. We can't just be a commodities company. And third, it's got to be operationally defensible, because I had this concept that eventually everything would commoditize, and I had to be doing something hard and different. And we began the pitch. And I'll share this with these guys, but so we had a method. And Reed and I were commuting to work every day. And we both lived in Santa Cruz. And the way we would work is like this. Every morning, Reed would swing by my house and pick me up to go to the office. And we would barely have left the driveway, and I go, okay, Reed, I got one for you. Personalized shampoo. People are gonna cut off a lock of their hair, they're gonna mail it to us. We're going to have a team of ace hair scientists, and we're going to formulate a custom blend just for them, and they'll subscribe to it. And then Reed would he wouldn't even react. He'd just be looking out the window like he hadn't even heard me. But of course, it's Reed, and so I know in there the wheels are spinning, and he's calculating the risks and rewards and opportunities and everything. And it might be 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and eventually he'd go, okay, that will never work, and here's why. And he'd lay into me with this incredible thesis about how shitty this idea was.
By the way, no one has done that one yet. So if you still want to do that,
They have actually.
it's available.
So I come right back at it, and we'd argue the whole way to work, and the next day I have another one. Okay, read, personalized sporting goods, or custom dog food, or vitamin. I mean, these are all things I pitched him. And then I pitched him the stupidest idea yet, which was the video rental by mail. Picture this. They come to the website, you pick out a movie, and we mail it to you, and then you keep it for a week, and you mail it back. And that was even stupider. This is like 1996, 97, so VHS. So it's heavy, expensive, and fragile, and that idea out the window. And so, but that was the process. And then we had the lucky break that you do when you're an entrepreneur sometimes. And I'm winding up for another pitch, and then Reed stops me, and he goes, "Hey, you got to see this thing." He goes, "I heard about this technology. It's a DVD. It's a little plastic disc, holds a movie." And he goes, "Maybe this will re-energize that video rental by mail idea." And we're batting this around, and then we go, "That's really compelling, because now we can maybe mail it. It'll be 29 cents. And so then we did the quintessential entrepreneurial thing, is rather than going to the office, we turned around, went to Santa Cruz, tried to buy a DVD, and none to be had, bought a little music CD at Logos, went 2 doors down to Paper Vision, if any of you were over that part of the hill, bought a little pink envelope that you put a greeting card in, and put the CD in the envelope, and addressed it to Reed, bought a stamp and put it in the mail slot in the Santa Cruz post office, and went to work. And the next morning, Reed held up a little pink envelope, unbroken CD, 29 cents, and for better or worse,
Plugged in the CD player and it worked.
it worked. And that was the moment. Maybe we go, maybe this will work.
So you talked about luck, and something went right. DVDs came along, and that went right. A lot of things have already gone right in the story. The fact that you and Reed happened to be driving back and forth every day was obviously a big right thing. When you think through the other things that happened after that, getting to me the big moment and I'm sure in Netflix at that point was when you finally came up with subscriptions. But before you get to subscriptions, the business is almost $1 million in revenue, and now everyone looks at the $1 million in ARR as like the big number you want to have, $1 million in ARR. You're not recurring revenue, so it's not ARR. But $1 million in revenue, okay, you're real, but 95% of that's sales.
Yeah.
So you're not a rental company, you're an e-commerce company.
Yeah, it was the thing is one of the things we did is we want to have a copy of every single movie that's available on DVD. And so we, beat the bushes trying to crack down marching band, all kinds of weird crap that was out on DVD as people were experimenting with the medium. But we did it. So we had, I think it was 290 titles. We had every single one. And as an afterthought, we go, let's sell them too. Because no one is selling DVDs. No stores have them. And so this idea of this video rental by mail that everyone thought was never going to work, it didn't work. But the sales worked incredibly well. And it was a plus and a minus. And the big plus, of course, was there was traffic. In other words, lots of people coming to the website, so we could experiment really quickly about how to make the rental part work. But as a business, it sucked, because it was a commodity business, the exact thing I was scared of. And I just knew that eventually Amazon would do it, and Walmart, and Kmart, and PetSmart, and then we're crushed. So the thing you're leading up to is that you get to this point, and you go, not only is this a dead-end business, but in a weird contradiction, it's making everything harder, because for customers it's confusing. Like, are you sell or do you rent? I mean, and those of you who run e-commerce, or any business, how complicated metrics can be when you have all kinds of weird stuff going on. And our operations were complicated. Everything was bad. And we go, we got to pick one and focus. And there's the challenge, is you pick sales, which is paying all of our salaries, but is a dead-end business, or do you pick rental, which we can get it to work, is a big business, but is basically on life support at that point.
It's a big business, it's defensible, and sales just isn't defensible.
Exactly. And so you go, well, it's classic, you walk away from the sure thing to take a bet on the long thing.
You mentioned testing and how testing, you had this traffic and testing was really important. And it seems that testing was part of the DNA from the very beginning. And it was a big part of what ultimately made you successful. Was there anything from your past, from Reed's past, a combination of the two that led to that?
Well, let's see. Guy who spent 10 years in direct marketing, testing, and metrics. Yes, of course, it's exactly that. But what was special is Reed is a mathematician. Reed is a computer scientist. So when you put those two together, how do you deep analytics and metrics and wanting to quantify everything you do? So it was spectacularly fun having a partner like that. And it was interesting because Reed immediately grasped the beauty of being able to know to the third decimal point whether the red website did better than the blue website. But there was other parts of it that he was not quite comfortable with. Like we eventually, at about a year and a half in, did the subscription business. And Reed, I have all kinds of background in subscription business from the magazines. And the core of it is the negative option, which means here's a free month, and if we don't hear from you, we're going to bill you. And Reed hated that. He thought it was the sleaziest thing ever. He goes, you're just going to bill someone without them saying they can bill you? And I go, they do. Anyway.
This is what the magazine business is.
Exactly. And I go, people are okay with it. It works. And so we had some interesting
But that testing
conversations.
culture, I mean, in software at the time, software wasn't delivered through the cloud then. There wasn't this notion of, we're going to put things out and see how users use it, and we're going to adjust the product and everything. So how did you guys build the systems in-house to deal with that kind of testing?
Yeah, we had to do it all, long form. We had to do it by hand. There was no Optimizely, there was no A/B testing tools you could get. You had to build everything yourself. And we had to hire, specialized engineers who knew how to do the extraction. We were running on Oracle Apps, I guess it was called then. A weird database, and it was really hard to get the data from. We had to build data lakes, the whole thing. But it was fascinatingly fun because it hadn't been done before. And we were applying all these things I'd learned in the direct marketing business and seeing how powerful they could be when you had that level of information at your fingertips. 'Cause in the mail letter business, personalization was like, hey, Marc Randolph, won't your friends on Charles Hill Road? It's this very rudimentary personalization, but this was the ability to serve a different web page to everybody based on things they'd done or they'd tried or liked. And then the analytics required to measure that level of testing, really, really fascinating. So you're right, I think that there's a lot of things about Netflix that people go, streaming, but there's a whole bunch of other things that we had to, I won't say pioneer, but I'll say we were certainly one of the early people in advancing things like the metrics, things like A/B testing, subscription businesses and things other than magazines.
I mean, you guys were pioneering it at the same time as Amazon and the other eBay was doing a ton of it and that sort of thing. But everyone was building it on their own. There weren't off-the-shelf solutions. So when you guys, when you finally came to subscriptions, so whatever process came to, okay, we're going to do subscriptions and it's going to be a negative option and it's going to be however many discs it was a month. At what point did you know for sure this is going to work? And then at what point did you burn the boats on everything else, the one-off, rentals and that
yeah,
sort of
so we knew that it was the negative option at the beginning was a 1 month free. And so when everyone flooded in on day one, there was some encouragement that this thing might have legs. But no one had paid us for it yet.
They gave you their credit cards, though.
They gave us our credit card, which is another thing that Reed shit his pants about. No one will want to do that. You're right. That's a good
Well,
thing.
and typically, because in some of the subscription businesses, before everything was in the App Store and everything else that I dealt with, when you ask for their credit card, the drop-off is huge. You know, 75% of the people drop out at that point.
Yeah, you're playing with when do you ask for it, and
Right.
how do you ask for it, and how many screens, what do you say? But yeah, but in other words, we go, number one, the take rate on this offer is astronomically good. So we're all of a sudden going, because this is not just we're plugging along for a year and a half, and then we try this. No, this is like experiment number 6,247. So we're pretty much used to trying things and having them just not work or give us minor glimmers. You know, people, you know, product market fit, you know, it's like pornography, which is you can't really define it, but you know it when you see it. And this was seeing it. It was incredible. I go, oh my God, we've got it. But the thing is, when do we know is in day 30, when we're all waiting to see what the cancellations are almost nothing coming up, day 26, 27, and then you get to day 30 and still almost no one cancels. And that's the point we go, wow, this is actually working. And by then we're watching the fall off curve and there's extremely little churn. And so this was in September, we launched it. And
September
we
of
went
01?
cold turkey in January.
September of 01? September
99.
Of 99. So
99, yeah.
99. And I would assume then, I was going to jump to this later, but I'll hit it now. You guys raised your last venture round in April of 2000, I would assume on the heels of huge success in the subscription model, is that right?
Yes.
Big financing round, $50 million raised. You didn't know it at the time, but April of 2000 was a month after the peak of the dot-com bubble.
Yeah, we suspected it, that we were in deep, deep, deep trouble. And you probably maybe did more research than I did. I think that the $50 million money came a little bit after that, more when we were already desperate and terrified that we were going to lose the company. But now, of course, everyone knows that subscription businesses are incredibly great because they're predictable. So you can acquire your customer and you can measure your churn, your lifetime value, and you go, wow, if this customer is worth $200 over the next 12 months, I can invest $60 or $70 to acquire them, even though they pay me $0 upfront. So great business, except if it's very expensive because you've got to fund all that acquisition, and it's way harder when you have a hit.
Yeah, and it's really growing.
That's what's happening, is that customers were flooding in, money was flying out, and then as you give me PTSD about, all of a sudden the market drops out of the dot-com business, and where before we could go out on Highway 17 and wave a green flag and a dump truck full of money would back up in the driveway and pour it out, and we come out with our shovels and our wheelbarrows. All of a sudden they're all going like this and driving by, and the dot-com is the scarlet letters.
When I look at the lucky points in the history, because I was the company that I sold my last company to, we had a big competitor, and they went out and did a secondary and raised $300 million in a secondary. And we went and did the biggest software acquisition at the time in history, but didn't do a secondary. And so when the bottom dropped out and there's no secondaries, guess which company survived. So the dot-com bubble bursting, a lot of good companies ended up nowhere. So being able to get that money then was critical.
Yeah, it was terrifying though. There was 6 months or so where we were not sure we were going to make it, and it was not even it wasn't even VC, it was VC money aided, but it was actually came from LVMH. So it was I don't know.
Does LVMH still hold their?
I was going to say dumb money, but
yeah.
That's what we said. It's not because it was, but that's what we called it when it was someone who was trying to jump on a bandwagon. Rather than doing all kinds of deep analytics.
Yeah.
Lucky. That's what I call it.
So about raising capital, unless I missed something prior to Netflix, Netflix was the first company that you were involved in that raised venture money. Is that right? Or that you were involved in raising venture money?
No, because we raised, at Integrity QA, we raised money too.
You raised money at Integrity
But yeah, that was Humber Winblad, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Or, I don't think they're around anymore.
No. They're
Yeah.
long since gone.
But yeah, that was the first time. That was the first time we were, I guess, playing for real. You know, really swinging for it and raising lots of money too over time.
So you survived the dot-com crash. And you guys, at what point after you raised that last money did you have the come to Jesus, cut out, we have to get there at 1 million subscribers, not 2 million. We have to cut out a huge chunk of the employee base. How far along did it take you guys before you made that decision?
So it was, there's the famous Blockbuster story, and it was right after we came back from Dallas that.
When Blockbusters.
Yeah, because I can tell a story if I need to, but
Yeah.
But basically what happens is we were broke, going at it, we were going to be bankrupt, being successful, and tried everything we could think of and couldn't think of anything, and decided to sell ourselves to Blockbuster, and flew to Dallas and pitched them that they should buy our company for $50 million, because we at that time were owed $50 million. And they obviously laughed at us, at the hubris, how dare we think we could be worth $50 million. But anyway, it was crushing because I was so confident that if we could just get the meeting, that they would go for it. And now they weren't going to go for it, they were going to compete with us. So that's when we got back and went, wow, we are screwed here. And if we have to figure this out, we've got to do it ourselves. There's no one who's going to invest in us, no one's going to buy us. So that's when we said, okay, what are we going to do? And that's where we laid off huge amounts of the company, focused in the business, only did the most profitable, most closest to profitable things we could. Yeah, that was a very, very scary time.
But at that point, the business was very, very predictable, right? So you literally could see, okay, we're going to be cash flow positive at this future point. So we have a high degree of confidence we're going to get there.
Yeah, there's a couple of weird little stories which don't get people, little ones.
Forget.
But I'll tell you real briefly about it. But so we were when the market fell out the bottom in April of 2000, we were actually in registration to go public, and we had the big fad back then was portals. You want to be a portal. You want to be the website where everyone who wants to do that goldfish portal, everything in the world about goldfish, you're going to come to goldfish.com. And those are the kind of pitches you heard. And what our investors were telling us is movies. You're going to be the movie website. You're going to have show times. You're going to sell tickets. And we began building that business. And our registration statement to go public was based on becoming a movie portal. And so when obviously the market collapsed, the bankers stopped returning our calls, and that got tossed. But it saved us, because when we went in to say, what do we cut back to? Everything goes except for something that potentially could cost us less to do it than someone would pay for it, which at the time was a very, very weird concept.
So one of the big differences between starting companies back then, founders back then, and founders today is back then it was very common for a founding team to know, okay, this person's the CEO, but we're going to get to a certain point and we're going to bring in the professional CEO, the full-time CEO. And today, there's this ethos. Everyone thinks they're Mark Zuckerberg, or they think they're Elon Musk, or they think they're Steve Jobs. They have to be CEO for life. I think there's issues with where we are today on that, because there are some entrepreneurs that are great entrepreneurs, but they actually should hand the reins off at some point. When you went through that transition, incredibly painful transition, how long did it take you to get comfortable with this being the right decision? And walk us through that sort of process of discovery for you.
So there's a brief little bit of background I've got to share, which is that, I mentioned how Reed and I connected on the whole data piece. The other thing, though, that Reed and I found in each other was we both shared this trait of, it's now called radical honesty, But from the minute we met each other, we realized we both shared that trait of telling people exactly what we thought.
So kind of no bullshit.
Yeah, and no shading the truth, no ulterior motives, and it was so refreshing. And those arguments we'd have in the car about this, was it good or bad, they were like cats and dogs fighting. But what would happen is all of a sudden you get to this realization of, oh, that does make sense. And you immediately, both of us forget whose ideas they were, who was arguing for or against, and you get excited about where you're going forward with it. It's this incredibly honest relationship. Probably more so than I have with my wife. It's like a very weird, incredible co-founder power. So, as the frame, Reed at the time was not working at Netflix. He was running TechNet, I think which is the Silicon Valley lobby. And but he was the chair of the board. He was the angel investor. He was coming in every week or so to shoot the shit and find out how things are going. And one day he pops his head in and goes, "Hey, Mark, we got to talk." And that's never good. And I go, "Okay, Rudy, what's up?" And he's carrying his laptop computer by the screen when it's dangling open. And he props it up in some books on my desks and begins going through a PowerPoint. And it starts off like, "Mark, you're doing a great job. Your people respect you. You've hired well." But then the next slide is like, "But I'm starting to see I'm concerned about a few things." And I'm going, oh my God, I had to stop him. And I go, "I am not going to sit here, Reed, and let you pitch me on how much I suck." So he goes, "Oh no, I'm sorry." And he shuts the thing. And he begins telling me that he's concerned, that he's seeing signs of judgment problems. He's seeing signs of scale. And they're fine now, but he goes, "We have to be flawless. We've got to execute. The business is going to be growing. And I'm concerned that where there's smoke now, there'll be fire later." And I was going, oh shit, he's going to fire me. Because I was the chair of the board, he had more stock than I did. And that wasn't it at all. He was actually proposing that he leave TechNet and come work at Netflix full time, that he come in as the CEO, and that I slide over to president, and that we run it together. And it was, you maybe made it a little mild. It was painful. It was painful. And there's probably a lot of founders here, but when you found a company, you have this dream that you're going to be the CEO of this big, successful company. But if you think about it, those are two different dreams. You have the dream of being the CEO and the dream of the big, successful company. And worse, that big, successful company dream is not just your dream, it's your investor's dream for sure. And it's your employee's dream also, and probably even your customer's dream. And you have to go, wow, which one's more important to me if they're mutually exclusive? And because of that relationship I had with Reed, I knew he was not shading the truth. I knew he had no ulterior motive. He really was saying, if we want this to be successful, we should do it together. And he was saying, I should be the CEO. He should be the CEO. And it was really hard to argue with that logically. And I had to go back and then reconcile that emotionally. And it's really hard. And it took me a while, a couple days, and a lot of wine. And, a lot of late nights with my wife sitting out on our porch, talking it through. And I eventually decided that he's right, that it was hard to argue that the company would be a lot stronger with the two of us running it together. And that if I really believed in this company being a big, successful company, I should do everything I could to make that happen. And having Reed join me was probably the best thing I could do. And those of you who are also founders know about this other dynamic where you have your early group of people, 8 or 10 people, and you handpick them, and they are generalists, and they do anything you need, and they work tirelessly nights and weekends, incredibly passionate and devoted. And if you're lucky, you get to be successful, and all of a sudden you've got to bring in the person who is your director of marketing and go, you've done everything I want. You're an amazingly talented person, but you're a generalist, and we need a specialist for where we're going. You're not the right person. And oh my God, that is such an awful thing to have to tell someone. But we can do that as founders, but it's really hard turning that same lens on yourself. Am I the right person to fill this role going forward?
Because of course you are in your mind, always, right?
Correct. And part of being a founder is this incredible self-confidence. Everyone's been telling me this was never going to work for years. I'm gonna figure it, and it's hard to do it. But listen, I'm looking. That was 25 years ago, and if I have to look back at all the decisions I ever had to make at Netflix, which there was thousands, that's probably the best decision I ever made, which was making space for Reed to join the company full time, and partly because those next 4 or 5 years we ran the company together was the renaissance at Netflix. I mean, so many of the big things that set the stage for what Netflix became happened then. And then certainly, like, God, look at the talent that I made space for. One of the, handful of people that can be an early stage person and a phenomenal late stage person and play chess at that level. It was painful, but wow, was that worth it?
So having gone through that experience, I alluded to the work you do working with entrepreneurs now. Do you find yourself in a position very often, because really early stage founding team, 2 or 3 people, you're not coaching them on CEO dynamics and that sort of thing, but have you found yourself over the years in that position and used your own experience to sort of persuade them, convince them, explain to them why this is probably the best long-term thing for you?
It has happened twice, where I had to coach a founder CEO to step back. And it's funny sitting here.
You have more authority coaching people on that than probably anyone alive, given the experience of what happened.
100%.
Did it work?
It's funny sitting here because Jackson Square has a bunch of interesting things for me. One is my advertising agency when I was doing direct marketing for software. Never done. The agency was right here, Jackson Square. And Chubby's, a company that I was mentoring those guys since within about a few months of them starting, their office was here for many years. And they had 4 co-CEOs.
Oh, jeez.
Yes, exactly. And
make a decision.
Yeah, and it was okay when they were small, but eventually you get to the point it doesn't work, and then one person took himself out, the other 3 thought it should be them, and that was a classic case of having to tell the person. There was 2 people who were really talented, self-evidently were going to be the 2 people to choose from, and having to go to the person we ended up not choosing, and telling them, you will look back way more fondly on a big successful company that you were part of than that you were the CEO of something which may not have made it.
The 4 CEOs in the box, I've never actually heard of that one. I've seen 2 CEOs in the box a bunch. The other thing I've seen a lot of is in a 6 or 8 person company, we have a CEO, we have a COO, and we have a president.
Yeah, I've seen. Yeah, it's like the sign that you go, yeah, this is basically guys who can't make a decision, not just about the business, but about what their role should be.
Yeah, they don't know who's running the show.
It's a sign of problems.
So you talk a lot in the book about Knowles and your experience with Knowles. Can you talk a little bit about how that impacted your leadership style at Netflix? And are there things when you look at Netflix today and the culture of Netflix, and everyone's seen the culture decks and this sort of thing, that you think come directly from that experience?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think freedom and responsibility, all that came from Knowles for me. And Knowles, if you don't know, is an outdoor leadership school. Basically, it's a leadership school, but it uses the wilderness as a classroom. Because the wilderness can put us in situations which are so similar to many things in life, where there's no obvious path, where you have to deal with adversity, where you have to be with a group of people of different strengths and backgrounds and talents, and figure out where you're going. Where if you're a leader, you've got to communicate with clarity and confidence where you're going about things you may not be clear or confident about. But the cool thing about it is that I began going to Knowles when I was 13. I took my first course when I was 13 years old. And their teaching model is they'll have a 15 young 13, 14-year-olds and 2 instructors, and they'll drop them at a trailhead in the Wind River Mountains of Wyoming back then, and off you go, and you don't come out for a month. And the second day, they'll start out and go, okay, Randolph, you're leader of the day for this group of 4. Off you go. Here's where your camp is tonight. And one of the instructors will follow you the whole day. And you're fucking 13 years old, and you're forced to make decisions about which way do we go, and how long do we stop for lunch, or, oh, he says he has a little bit of a hot spot in his heel, should we stop and fix it, or tough it out? I mean, as a 13-year-old, you're making decisions with real consequences that you find out the results of those decisions almost immediately thereafter. And you have a coach at the end of the day goes, listen, here's some things you might have done differently. And you do that every 3 or 4 days. You're rotating. And I don't see many opportunities in this world for people of that age to make decisions with real consequence, where they see the results of the impact of their decisions so quickly, and then have some skilled advice about how to interpret that. I mean, these days we protect young people so long, they don't have to make real consequential decisions until they're in their 20s. And I was doing that when I was 13. And then little by little, I then became an instructor at the school. And now I'm doing this, but I'm in charge of I'm one of the junior instructors, so I have a small responsibility. Then I have the whole course. But little by little, you're getting this graduated increasing of responsibility, pressure, decision making. You're learning that leadership is situational, that it's one thing to go, it's a nice sunny day. I don't know, what do you guys think? Should we have lunch by the lake, or what do you think over here? Should we go a little further to the viewpoint? What do you think? It's collaborative. Then someone falls and they've got a compound fracture of their femur, and it's like, here's what we're doing. You do this right now. And those are both appropriate based on the situation. There's lots of styles. And that's the same, so all these things about leadership, that by the time I began doing it, what I'll call for real, for money, I'd been doing it for 10 years, 15 years. And that's what I've learned at Knowles, is that leadership thing. And that freedom and responsibility, that famous thing at Netflix where, no rules, no vacation policy, no expense policy, no travel policy, no rules at all. How does that work? And it's a culture that every early stage company has. You have those same hand-picked people we talked about before. And you go, all right, see that mountaintop over there, Greg? I'm going to meet you there in 4 days. I need you to have this finished. And then you go, here's what you have to do. Here's what you have to do. And you're not following up, you're not helping them. You go, I have my own shit to deal with. And you trust this person's going to figure it out. They're going to bump into stuff, overcome obstacles, and you'll show up there in 4 days, bloody and battered, but you'll have it done. And I've given you the full freedom to solve the problem the way you want, and the responsibility to solve it your way. And that's how it works in the mountains. You don't know where you're going to bump into. You're figuring out, is it better to go this way or this way? Should we go the closest way over that cliff or the long way around? And that's what happens at a startup. And that comes directly from my experience, from that learning comfort with that style of management where I go, I'm not going to have command and control. I have to be clear about what I expect. I have to pick the people who have the right capabilities to do what I expect of them, and I've got to leave them alone.
It's pretty easy, I would assume, with a culture like that. People self-select in or out, because there's some people for whom that just feels too foreign, too hard to deal with.
You're being a little gracious. Sometimes they don't select out, and you have to select them out for themselves. But yes, you're absolutely right. It is not for everyone. What happens in that scenario is great for the first 8 people. You've all hand-picked them. They're all talented. So now you're a bit bigger, and someone shows up late, And you go, ooh, I can't have this. All right, I need status reports from everybody so I know in advance of this problem. And everyone goes, oh God, it's status reports. And then someone's there on time, but they overspent. And you go, okay, all right, I need to pre-approve every expense over $5,000. And everyone's going, oh my God. And what you're doing, well-meaning way, is you're saying, I'm going to build some guardrails to protect myself from people with bad judgment. And what the Netflix experiment really was is, what happens if you build a culture where it's built for people with good judgment? There are no guardrails. And lo and behold, the reveal is that what makes people want to work someplace, surprise, surprise, is not kombucha on tap. And it's not fireman poles and nap pods.
Or hot tubs.
Or hot tubs.
Yeah.
It's agency. And you're right. It only if you're building a culture of people with good judgment, you can't have people there who don't have good judgment.
But it also means you need to react very quickly. When you give people that much agency, if you lose faith in them, you have to act quickly.
People think it's just as simple as let's get rid of the rules. It's not. There's a tremendous amount of things that go into having a culture that can work like that without totally screwing you up. But it's more than that. There's way more power to it than there is risk, because by having this distributed, by having freedom and responsibility, you can put your decision making out at the fringes of the organization, where you're closest to the customer, you're closest to the problems, and you're like a dinosaur, which is the one, rather than having to have the steps in something and it's got to go up to the brain and then come back again, like most big companies are. It's instantaneous because you've given someone the authority to make decisions. It's like two quick things. I could talk culture forever, so you got to stop me. But two things. So one is, if you think about Netflix, who's making huge, expensive bets on content, that decision is not made by Ted Sarandos, nor is it made by Ted's lieutenants. It may be their lieutenants, but frequently their lieutenants. They've pushed it out. They've given great spending authority to people at the fringes of the organization, because that's how you find a Squid Games. That's how you find a paper, whatever it's called, money heist. I mean, by being in touch with what's going on out there. And at Netflix, the manager really only has two responsibilities to manage in this scenario. And one is you've got to have the right people in the right seats. And they probably spend most of their time on, are the right people in the right seats? Do they have judgment? But the other thing is responsible for is to make sure every single person on their team has all the information and context to make decisions. And I don't mean narrow, like what's your role, what's the department's role, what's the company doing, what's happening with their competitors, what's their finance situation, how's our cash look, whatever they need to make good decisions. So here's a little anecdote. So I was at a party at Reed's house about 1.5 years ago, before he stepped down as CEO. And we were talking about that right people, the right seats, information and context. And he goes, I have a little metric I use to see how I'm doing. And I go, what is it? And he goes, I try and see how long I can go between having to make a decision. And at the time I talked to him, it was 7 weeks. Because to him, if he can not have to make decisions or approve decisions or review decisions, that means he has the right people in the right seats and he's giving them all the information and context they need to make good decisions. That came from way back. That's a Knowles thing at the very beginning.
That's pretty incredible. I mean, that really is incredible. Winding back a little bit, early days of startups, the earliest days of startups. So before you have a big team and culture and everything. In my experience, being a founder, early day startups are hard. Like things aren't working, you're giving it your all, you're working incredible hours, and it's an up and down. Like you hear something great one day and things are wonderful and you think it's going to the moon, and the next day you're crashing down hard. For me, dealing with that up and down, I always had co-founders, and you had a co-founder in Netflix. But the other thing that you talk a lot about in the book is the role that your wife played in sort of smoothing that out for you and making that easier for you. can you talk a little bit about the role that she played in what, the role she played in Netflix success?
Yeah. How do I frame this? How can I possibly frame this one? So when I was when I was in my late 20s, maybe 28, 29, I was working like crazy, like 7 days a week. Staying late in the morning, and because I loved what I was doing. I was doing mail order, direct mark. Oh my God, I couldn't stay away. But I was at the time living with my girlfriend, who was not my wife, and she somehow was able to make it clear to me that this was not the basis for a sustainable relationship. And it triggered this soul searching in me about, well, what do I do? And I kind of decided that I needed to figure out how I could have my cake and eat it too. How could I do startup stuff, but yet not lose this woman, but more importantly, for my own sake, have a good relationship with her. And my challenge was even harder because there was a third leg of this stool, which is that I'm an outdoorsy guy. The whole Knowles thing might have given you a hint. But I love, backcountry skiing and kayaking and mountain biking and climbing and surfing. All these things which you cannot squeeze in between your 10 o'clock call and your 11:30 meeting. And if I was going to have a life where I had a relationship with my girlfriend and was able to get out and do these things, I had to figure stuff out. And it began this lifelong quest, really, which I've never stopped, which is to achieve balance in my life. Which is it possible to have all three of those things in some reasonable balance and not be compromising them, or not compromising all of them? And I made that a big, big priority for myself. I did not say we used to fantasize that I should get a job as a postman in Montana, where I started work at 7 o'clock in the morning and I finished at 3, and then when I was driving away from the post office, I wasn't thinking about anything besides petting the dog when I got home. I had a passion and a job, which you all know, you never stop thinking about it. So you really had to work at how you compartmentalize it. And just one thing I did, and there's a bunch of tricks we had, but every Tuesday, without fail, 5 o'clock, I'm out the door. My wife gets a sitter. We had kids at the time. No phones. Luckily, there weren't phones for a while. Even when the phones came, no phones. And we did a date night every Tuesday. And if you had a crisis, we're going to wrap it up by 5. You got to talk to me. We do it on the way to the car. And it was law. And it was the role that she played was having this world that was apart from all the other stuff in my head. That we could talk about something other than that. That I could think about something other than that. That I could clear my head. And having that it's a different value. That having a founder is someone who shares all those things, who knows what you're going through. In this case, it was having someone which told me I had a life outside of this, which means when things go wrong in the business, it's not your whole world. It's a startup. It's not the end of the world. So really, that balance thing is really, and I'll give you the heavy part, is that you've alluded to my background, so I've had a fair amount of success. I've had 3 IPOs and
a fair amount.
A fair amount. 3 IPOs and 2 unicorns, and so and Netflix is ridiculously successful. But that's not the thing that I'm proud of, because as you guys know, even just within 2 miles of here, there's 50 people who've had more success than that. What I'm proud of is the fact that I was able to do that and stay married to the same woman, not be my 7th company and 7th wife, that my kids all know me, and as best I can tell, like me. I still get out, backcountry ski, mountain bike, and I've done it the whole time. And the fact that I was able to have all those things and the companies, that was fucking hard. And that I'm proud of.
I think that deserves it. If there's an inspiration, obviously Netflix is an inspiration, but that is also inspirational, I have to say. So, life after Netflix and startups after Netflix. You alluded to some of your successes. You've had phenomenal success since leaving Netflix. Can you talk a little bit about how, pick one, Looker, fantastic company. Did the idea for Looker, did some of that come out of your experience at Netflix? Because obviously a lot of that testing and analytics and everything else, it's the...
No, I got tricked into doing Looker. I was done. I figured Netflix, that's a great way to finish. I'm not going to work 7 days a week. I'm not going to think about it all the time anymore. I'll dabble. I'm not going to play golf, and I'm still going to do startup stuff, but I'll be a mentor. And I began mentoring. And I had a good friend, a guy named Lloyd Tabb, who I've known for 20 years, now 30 plus years. And Lloyd, if you don't know him, is the quintessential technical genius, okay? Like just brilliant. But he's an individual contributor brilliant. And he's the guy who rides around the office on a unicycle, and everyone goes, what is this guy? And Lloyd is a goose that lays golden eggs, which means that everyone's looking around the office and going, what the hell is this goose doing in the office? And then after a few days, the goose stops and goes, and then out pops this freaking golden egg. And everyone goes, oh my God, a golden egg. And Lloyd is that. He's riding on the unicycle and he leans over, looks at someone's monitor and goes, if you tried doing this, and it's like, oh my God, we were trying to solve that problem for months. Anyway, that's Lloyd, but individual contributor. And of course, Lloyd had a great idea for the new analytics language. And he's going, hey, Mark, I've got to make this into a company. I want to do it. And he goes, but I want to do something different. I want to be the CEO. And I go, you don't want to be the CEO, Lloyd. And he goes, oh yeah, I do. And it's classic because as most engineers know how stupid the business side is. They can't make decisions, and everything they do is not logical. So Lloyd, of course, goes, I'm going to be the CEO. And he goes, but you got to help me. And I go, I'll help you. I'll see you a couple hours a week. He goes, no, I need you to help me full time. And we negotiate, and I finally go, okay, I'll help you 4 days a week. And I'll get you going, get you started, get your feet under you, and then So we go, and I'm working now there full time with Lloyd. We're getting this thing going, kind of exciting. And then of course, 6 months in, Lloyd goes, oh my God, why would anybody want to be CEO? This job is terrible. There's no right answers. Someone's always unhappy with the decision you make. He goes, you do it. So all of a sudden, there I am. And so for the first couple of years at Looker, I was ABC was my job title on my business card, which was anything but coding. And then it took me almost 6 years to work myself fully out of a job.
And not long after that, it must have been not long after that it sold then.
That was the ultimate out of the job. Yeah, we sold it to Google for about $2.5 billion. So.
Small success.
Good outcome.
You said something really interesting in the book. I think this was in reference to the subscription model, which was you didn't have to get, you could polish it, polishing the turd, polish it, get the perfect subscription model. But it wasn't about getting the perfect subscription model. If you had something people really wanted, they would trip over themselves to find ways to get to it. So that was the first thing, to figure out if you have something that people really want.
Yeah, I made that mistake at the beginning. I was a perfectionist, and things were really beautiful. But you're right. If it's a bad idea, then a perfect test is not going to make it the right idea. And we began going faster and faster and faster and shittier tests. And in my career, I have never gotten to the bottom. I've never done something so bad that I said, oh gosh, that was too bad. I've got to back up. Never. I don't know if anyone skateboards. There is this, you have to kind of, if you're dropping into a half pipe, you got to step on the board and step down. And no one, when they learn that, falls forward. They always fall back because no one's willing to step as far forward as you need to. And that's what people do with their testing. They're never willing to make it. Success is, here's my deep pronouncement, success is proportionate to how many things you try. And the number of things you try is proportionate to how quickly and cheaply you can try them.
Velocity in testing.
Absolutely, and it's validation hacking. And I promise you're building too much. That minimal viable product is like way overbuilt. Right. You want the crappiest thing that will give you some inkling. As long as you can do it cheaply and quickly, gosh, do that all day long. There you go. There's my direct marketing applied to startup bill.
Marc, thank you so much.
My pleasure.